One morning, thousands of people simply stopped. No war, no obvious disaster. Their cities, their roads, their rituals, abandoned mid-sentence. Across history, entire civilizations vanished almost overnight. And the strangest part? We still don't fully know why. Around 1200 BC, the eastern Mediterranean was the most connected, prosperous region on Earth. The Mycenaeans, the Hittites, the Minoans, the Egyptians, all trading, communicating, building. Palace economies humming. Ships crossing the sea loaded with copper and tin. Then, within about 50 years, nearly all of it collapsed. Palaces burned. Trade networks went silent. The writing systems used by some of these cultures disappeared entirely. Not evolved, not replaced, just gone. Whole cities were abandoned and never resettled. Archaeologists initially pointed to invaders, the so-called Sea Peoples, mysterious groups who appear in Egyptian records attacking coastlines. But here's the problem with that theory. The destruction was too widespread, too simultaneous, for any single group to explain it. The Sea People show up in the records, yes, but they may have been a symptom, not the cause. More recent analysis suggests something far more complicated, a systems collapse. Drought data pulled from tree rings and sediment cores shows a prolonged dry period across the region right around that time. Harvests failed. Food stores ran out. And because these palace economies were deeply interconnected, when one node in the network broke, pressure transferred to the next. Then the next. Like a chain of dominoes built across an entire civilization. Add to that, earthquakes struck several key cities in rapid succession. Internal rebellions likely flared as starving populations turned on their rulers. Trade dried up, which meant no more bronze. And without bronze, armies couldn't equip themselves, farmers couldn't maintain tools, and the whole technological foundation crumbled. No single cause killed the Bronze Age world. It was a cascade, drought feeding famine, famine feeding unrest, unrest feeding invasion, invasion feeding more collapse. The system was complex and deeply fragile, and when stress came from multiple directions at once, it had no resilience left. What's sobering is how modern that sounds. Interconnected systems. Supply chain dependency. Climate stress. The Bronze Age collapse isn't just ancient history. It's a case study in how sophisticated societies can unravel faster than anyone thought possible. The classic Maya civilization built some of the most remarkable cities in the ancient world. Tikal, Palenque, Copan, stone pyramids rising above jungle canopies, astronomical observatories, elaborate calendars, a fully developed writing system. At their peak, the Maya lowlands supported millions of people. Then, between roughly 800 and 1000 AD, the great southern cities were one by one abandoned. This is called the Terminal Classic Collapse, and it's one of the most studied mysteries in archaeology. The cities weren't destroyed by foreign conquest, they were just left. Monuments were sometimes left unfinished mid-carving. Populations migrated north or dispersed into smaller communities. The drought hypothesis here is strong. Paleoclimate data from lake sediments and cave stalagmites shows severe, prolonged droughts striking the Maya lowlands during exactly this period. The Maya agricultural system was sophisticated but vulnerable. It relied heavily on rainfall for reservoirs and terrace fields. Several years of drought in a row would have been catastrophic. But drought alone still doesn't complete the picture. Research into Maya sites has also revealed extensive evidence of warfare between city-states during this period. Rather than uniting against a common environmental crisis, Maya elites appear to have intensified conflict over dwindling resources. Inscriptions show cities attacking each other, capturing and sacrificing rival kings, raiding agricultural land. And the land itself was being pushed past its limits. Deforestation for agriculture and construction had been accelerating for centuries. Soil erosion. Declining crop yields. The population had grown to a size the land could no longer reliably support, especially under drought conditions. So again, not one cause, but a convergence. Environmental stress, political fragmentation, resource depletion, and war all arriving together, feeding each other in a loop that the existing power structures couldn't manage. The northern Maya cities, Chichen Itza, Uxmal, survived and even flourished for a while longer. The collapse wasn't total. But the great southern centers never recovered. Jungle grew back over the plazas. The population fell by an estimated 50 to 90% in some regions. A civilization that had thrived for over 1,000 years contracted dramatically within a few generations. Of all the vanished civilizations, the Indus Valley might be the most haunting, because we still can't read their writing. The Indus Valley civilization, also called the Harappan civilization, flourished from roughly 2600 to 1900 BC across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. At its height, it was one of the largest civilizations on Earth, larger in geographic extent than ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were remarkably advanced. Grid-planned streets, sophisticated drainage and sewage systems, standardized weights and measures suggesting organized trade across vast distances. And then it declined. Cities shrank. The great urban centers were depopulated. People moved east and south into smaller rural settlements. By 1300 BC, the urban phase was essentially over. For decades, the dominant theory blamed Aryan migrations, waves of people moving in from Central Asia, displacing the Harappans. But the archaeological evidence for violent conquest is thin. There's no mass destruction layer, no piled-up war dead, no burned palaces. The more compelling current explanation centers again on climate, specifically a monsoon shift. Paleoclimate studies suggest the monsoon patterns that had watered the Indus region for centuries weakened significantly around 2000 BC. Rivers that fed the civilization, including the now dry Ghaggar Hakra, changed course or dried up. Without reliable water, agriculture became precarious. Cities that had been built around stable river systems suddenly found themselves in a drying landscape. What makes the Indus case particularly strange is how orderly the decline appears to have been. No burned cities, no evidence of mass panic. People seem to have gradually moved away over generations, an organized, slow withdrawal rather than a sudden catastrophe. Which raises a fascinating question. Is a slow, managed decline actually more tragic than a dramatic collapse? The Harappans may have seen it coming and simply had no way to stop it. Because we cannot read their script, we have no first-hand account of what they experienced. No records of the last king, no lamentations carved into stone. They left behind perfectly engineered cities and total silence. 3 civilizations. 3 different continents. 3 different centuries. And yet the patterns rhyme in ways that are difficult to ignore. In every case, climate stress played a significant role: drought, monsoon failure, prolonged agricultural crisis. In every case, the civilizations were complex and interconnected enough that stress in one area cascaded into others. In every case, the political and social structures that might have managed the crisis either failed or made things worse through internal conflict. And in every case, historians initially reached for a single dramatic explanation: invaders, catastrophe, conquest, before the real answer turned out to be far messier and more systemic. There's a concept in complexity theory called a fragility threshold. Highly optimized systems, ones that have become very efficient at operating in stable conditions, are often the most brittle when conditions change. A civilization that has perfectly tuned itself for centuries of reliable rainfall has, in a sense, no muscle memory for drought. A trade network so interdependent that every node relies on every other has no fallback when one fails. The civilizations that survived these kinds of pressures tended to be